Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 7, Where the Boys Are. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So, we always start by going over which patients arrived in the hospital for this episode, and the first one was a boy who, because his older brother didn't let him play Monopoly with his friends, decided he was going to eat most of the pieces so that they couldn't play either. And he thinks he did a really smart thing here because now his parents, he believes, will make his brother let him play going forward so that he doesn't do something like eat the pieces again. And so Christina is assigned to monitor through x-rays the pieces traveling out of his body, and then basically has to go through the feces in order to find and account for all of the pieces. However, near the end of the episode, one of the pieces does end up perforating, and the boy does have to go to surgery, which Christina is not allowed in on because Bailey knows that she erased her name from the Humpty Dumpty surgery in the previous episode and is using her authority to punish Christina by keeping her out of surgeries. The second patient is a pregnant couple, and the woman fell in the shower and ended up breaking her wrist. However, it is discovered that the fall unfortunately did also end the life of her child, which leads to her needing to not only have her wrist put into a cast, but also deliver the dead baby. And this episode also, through working on the same patient, brings Addison and Callie closer together, and it's one of the first times we see them interacting as characters. And then the third official patient is a reassignment surgery, which ends up turning into a breast cancer diagnosis, which ends up with Donna, the trans woman, wanting to have her surgery, even if it means that she is going to die of breast cancer, because that is more important to her than her own life, and she'd rather die in her truth than survive outside of it. We then also have a couple of unofficial patients. The first one is that the men, so Richard, Burke, George, Alex, Derek, and Joe and Walter from the bar all go on a camping trip together, though they don't end up actually camping because it looks like they only spend like a day there before they decide to pack it in and head back. But while they're at the camping trip, some drama occurs, and a lot of the characters kind of hash out their problems and have their little therapy sessions for all the drama that was happening back in the hospital. George notices that Burke may have a tremor when they're fishing. Alex tells George about Callie and Sloane sleeping together or having at least a one-night stand, which of course leads to them having an open-handed combat overseen by Richard. Richard and Derek and Burke, of course, talk about how Derek doesn't have guy friends and how Derek wanted space. And then they kind of talk around until Derek finally figures out what he wants to do. And while the fight is ongoing, Walter ends up knocked into some rocks, ending up with a head wound, which they then do stitch up out in the forest, and Burke is able to not tremor while he does the stitches. So even though George noticed there may have been a tremor, that kind of put him off the scent again. Meanwhile, Izzy and Sydney, well, Izzy is assigned by Bailey to basically have like a peer therapy, peer review, peer counseling session, and the person that is her peer is Sydney Heron, who we had seen in one of the previous episodes, who is a very, very happy person. And Izzy then helps Christina go through feces in order to avoid talking to her, but ultimately at the end of the episode, we do get them having a heart-to-heart where Sydney reveals in her past how she was at fault for losing a kid and how she had a mental breakdown, had to take time off, and then was able to come back to the hospital, and she plastered a smile on. Everyone thought she was fine, but she wasn't always fine, and that is why she wanted Izzy to know that she could talk to her. And then Izzy does open up about how she misses Denny all the time, and while she wants to be at the hospital, it's incredibly difficult for her to be there because she misses Denny all the time and was in love with him. Bailey and Christina again are having a bit of a Bailey knows Christina erased her name from the board. Christina won't tell her why because she's still covering for Burke, who she obviously is in love with at this point. And Bailey, because she won't tell her, has decided to use her authority as her resident and her teacher to take Christina off any non-Burke surgeries, which has led to her in this episode not being able to, even though she spent all day with the patient, not being able to be a part of that surgery. And then we, of course, have Meredith and Sloane is trying to talk Meredith out of being with Derek, saying there's too much baggage, and even if Derek comes back after getting space, that maybe she should consider not being with him. He flirts with her a bit. They have a weird friendship going on, which is fun to witness, and she is on his service for the day. However, at the end of the episode, we do have Derek coming back and basically asking Meredith to start over, and though she does make eye contact with Sloane, she ultimately decides to start over with Derek, and then they share a kiss while Sloane leaves the bar. And the last little bit is George comes back from the camping trip, finds Callie, says that they have something to talk about. She agrees, and then reveals that his dad has been admitted to the hospital as a bit of a cliffhanger for the next episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, followed then by the personal ranking list. So on our mostly objective ranking list, we start with the single episode supporting character introductions, and I am going to count the couples as one. So to start, we have Donna and Vicky Gibson, Donna formerly Daniel, and Vicky his wife, or now her wife, as she's going through the surgery, and we see how the transition has impacted their relationship. Then we have Jamie Carr and Ted Carr, who are the couple who unfortunately lost the baby because she tripped in the shower and ended up, Jamie broke her wrist, but her and Ted both lost the baby, and that is worth 1 point. Then we have Eric Sanborn, who was the child who decided to eat the Monopoly pieces to make a point to his brother and then almost died for it because it ended up perforating. And then we have positive 2 points for our multi-episode supporting character developments. The first development, of course, is Walter, who gets a head wound while camping and is then treated out in the woods. Good thing he went camping with doctors. And then the second one is a bit of Sydney's backstory, which she tells to Izzy, again, that she had once, when she had first started, been responsible and fully at fault for the death of a child patient, and how this had caused her to have a mental breakdown, take time off, came back, she plastered on a smile to pretend she was fine, and everyone thought she was fine, but she really wasn't fine, and that's why now she's there for Izzy should Izzy need to talk and dialogue with her. The next is positive 3 points for the successful emotional impact, and this, of course, was the fetal death, because not only was there, so they were smart about getting us to like the couple, they were very nice people, they were very happy people, they were full of hope, they had all these plans, they told us about the plans, what they wanted to have, how they wanted their child to grow up, what he would do when he was 15 and older, and planning this whole life, and then Addison has to break the news that the child is gone, that their baby has been lost, all from something so simple, like completely healthy one day, the next day the baby's gone because she tripped in a shower, which is not something that you would think, but that is what happened. And then the place where it really was successful with the emotional impact, because they took the time to outline what this baby's future could have been, how wanted the child was, how happy the parents were to have the child. We then see her having to actually, because she was so far along, give birth to the corpse. And that is, I think, where the emotional impact was really successful, because both were crying and they were not happy tears. There's still having to go through all of the pain of labor, and you don't even get the reward on the other end. And oh, it was very sad. Got a little choked up on it. I felt that was a very successful emotional impact for the episode, and it was devastating, especially because the actors were able to emote devastation very well. So that was then the successful emotional impact, 3 points. That brought us up to 10, but we still have many more positive points to go. So next we have our multi-season main character developments. And first one is the men go camping. I'm not going to give points for each and every character that it was involved because there was a lot of them, so we're just grouping them all together. They went camping. However, some standout developments from that camping trip are, of course, that Karev and George end up getting into a fight. Also, George sees Burke's tremor while he's fishing when he's trying to change the bait. However, he isn't 100% sure what he saw, and then when Burke successfully stitches the head wound of Walter, he kind of lets it go, but he did see it. I'm not really going to give points for that one. I'm going to say it's more of an honorable mention because it happened, but I don't know that it's actually worth like points because it's such a small thing and it doesn't actually go anywhere in this episode at least. And then the next 4 points is for Izzy having to do peer counseling with Sydney. Then we have our main relationship development, which of course is when Derek returns from camping. He greets Meredith at the bar, asks to start over, notes that this is the bar where they met when he was just a guy and she was just a girl, how she didn't even know his name. She didn't know about them being coworkers or the wife or any of the other things. But now this time he wants to do it right. He wants her to know him. And so he introduces himself to her again, and she hesitates at first, glancing over his shoulder where Sloane is coming back from the bathroom as they had been at the bar together. However, then she says, like, introduces herself. Sloane leaves, and then her and Derek do kiss at the bar. And so that is worth another 4 points, bringing us all the way up to 26. And there were a couple negatives in the episode. The first negative, of course, is Bailey misusing her power. I understand that Bailey is hurt, and I do think that Christina did overstep a bit in removing the name, but at the same time, her and Burke are covering up yet again more negative messaging and behaviors, which is hiding his tremor and completing surgeries anyways, with her covering for him should he have a tremor in the OR. And Bailey is upset about this. Bailey asks why. And Bailey does technically have the authority to give assignments to the interns. However, it is a teaching hospital. Christina is the intern student who is there to learn so that she can be successful in her future career and get the practice that she needs under supervision so that when she is no longer under supervision, she will be able to help patients with hopefully minimal mistakes because she'll have gained that experience while she was an intern. And Bailey is in the role of a teacher. She is the resident in charge of her, and her role is to be a teacher and to make sure that her interns are getting the experience that they need and the learning that they need to be successful in their future careers. That is her job. So her letting her personal feelings about this incident get in the way of that by removing Christina from surgery so that she cannot gain that experience and cannot get that practice that she needs as an intern, which is part of the job of Bailey to ensure that she gets, is, in my opinion, a misuse of power. I understand the emotions behind it. I understand the reasons why she might make that decision. However, I do feel that the decision itself is a misuse, again, of power, and using that at work, doing that at work, affecting potentially, Christina's education, potentially future patients of hers if she doesn't get the experience she needs, impacting the working of the hospital. Like that, I think, is where there are negative consequences to this emotional decision made by Bailey. And that is why I think, again, it is a misuse of power, though I do understand the emotion behind it. So that is -2 points. And then we have our supporting relationship regression or breakup. And to be fair, they are already broken up. Callie and George, but George is still very sure when, they're at the camping that, he's ready to commit now. Callie and him are doing fine. She just doesn't know it yet. I believe he is his line or close to it. And he's very determined to get her back. So obviously Alex telling him about the fact that Callie had been sleeping with Sloane, as far as I thought, based on what we had been shown as the audience, I thought it was a one-night stand. But then her and Addison's conversation indicate that it could potentially have been more than a one-night stand, maybe like a casual hookup. And so if she was hooking up casually with him, then that may have been that. And then, of course, Alex overheard her and Sloane talking, which is how he knew about it. So he tells George that leads to their fight. And then, of course, George, when he gets back from the camping trip, goes to Callie, determined to like basically confront her about this, and then finds out about his dad. So that gets derailed. But he is so impacted by it that he does end up trying to engage in the fisticuffs with Karev. And so I would say that that is a regression because it's obviously negatively impacting him, and it is to do with the relationship he had with Callie. That's my reasoning for putting it here. So, all that being said, it is 22 points total. Highest score possible is 10. That does make this our first 10 out of 10 episode for the season. And so, our season 3 rankings so far, in the mostly objective ranking, we have first, Where the Boys Are, Let the Angels Commit, I Am a Tree, Time Has Come Today, Oh, the Guilt, What I Am, and then Sometimes a Fantasy is currently in last place. For my personal ranking, I did enjoy this episode. There were a couple of funny moments. There was a successful emotional impact. I really enjoyed the camping trip, how it was out of the hospital, how we had all the men together, how they kept going, like how they went over their dramas. And they each kind of kept pairing off into separate areas to kind of go over their own little therapy sessions with different people. I thought that was really fun. And there were a couple moments within that, such as the fight with Alex and George, where Richard basically had to take on the role of the dad and reprimand them. Then they had to have basically a slap fight with open hands because they got to protect their hands as surgeons, so no punching and no wrestling moves. We also got to see Joe and Walter outside of the bar. And then, of course, they talk about kind of, for Richard, he and Adele never had children because she didn't want to raise kids alone. And Walter basically had said the same thing to Joe, who always works at the bar. But whereas Richard was never willing to make that change, Joe does indicate that if he had to make the change, he would be willing to for Walter, which is one of those like little therapy sessions I was talking about. And then back at the hospital, again, it is kind of funny that Christina had to spend the day going through feces because she's covering for Burke. I do think Bailey misused her power there, but it was still entertaining to watch. Again, that successful emotional impact, and the first time we really see Callie and Addison interacting, and they seem to become friends, agree to get drinks to get together later. And then, of course, I do enjoy Meredith and Sloane's friendship. I don't think, as far as I can recall, I don't think they ever actually have any sort of physical relationship, but I do think that their friendship is fun even back when they were both the mistresses before Derek and Edison got their divorce. I think that was always, I think they always have a good uh, rapport, I think is the word I'm looking for, with each other, and that's always amusing and fun for me. And then I do like that we finally get them back sharing that kiss at the end of the episode. But at the same time, like, because they spent a lot of time on the camping trip, there was a lot of dramas going around. There wasn't as much time spent necessarily with the patients, other as more, well, the couple was because they had that successful emotional impact and they spent the time to make it impactful. Um, so I decided to give it a 9 overall. Like, I thought there wasn't really any major flaws, but it wasn't necessarily entertaining enough for me to give it a 10. And that's just purely based on my own personal opinion and personal enjoyment of the episode and its themes, etc. And of course, it was a successful emotional impact, but it was also devastatingly tragic, and that also gave negative emotions, which I don't necessarily enjoy as much. So 9 out of 10 is what I decided to give the episode. But that still puts it into first place, Where the Boys Are, and then Let the Angels Commit, I Am a Tree, What I Am, Sometimes a Fantasy, Time Has Come Today, and then Oh, the Guilt is in 7th place. Bringing us now to the series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective side, we had Season 1 ending with 77.78%, Season 2 with 76.67%, Season 3 with 40 out of a possible 230 so far. Meanwhile, on the personal ranking side, we had Season 2 in first with 72.22%, Season 1 with 66.67%, and then Season 3 so far has a score of 48 out of a possible 230. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 7, Where the Boys Are. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.